Carrick plays a 4-2-3-1, don't you? But actually, his tactics morph into something completely different and unusual. So in this video, I'm going to be doing a few things. I'll be explaining how Carrick builds attacks with two left wingers. I'll explain why he plays with no fixed striker and the unique role of his attacking midfielder. I know you've been through the ringer, Man United fans. I know it's been difficult. I know you're a bit exhausted, but stick with me. By the end of this, I'm going to put a smile on your face. I promise. So, what do Carrick's tactics exactly look like? And more crucially than anything, as you guys know, how will he apply them to Manchester United and the players within it? Because you've got to get those guys singing. Not literally, you knew that. Firstly, his formation is clearly a 4-2-3-1 on paper. I know, you know, we know, it's not played on there. However, something strange is already apparent here, because his attacking midfield is actually a striker. And if you dig that little bit deeper, you start to realise that his left back essentially played like a left winger. And the striker is basically playing as a left winger too. And the reason for it is making players sing. Not literally. So let's break down his tactics into different areas. I think it's the best way to do it, to understand why this is happening. Let's start with defence, because in build-up, the right centre-back here splits to the corner of the box. The left-back takes up a similar position on the other side. You've got the left centre-back and the two defensive midfielders forming a triangle in the middle, baiting the press from the opponents, before playing a long ball to the left wing in an attempt to isolate the opposition's fullback. Then you've got Carrick's other plan in build-up, which looks like this. The centre-backs come short for the ball, and the right-back, he stays reserved. All the while, head over to the left-hand side. The left-back has taken up an extremely high starting position, leaving the first phase of build-up. The right-back remained relatively deep most of the time, with Carrick preferring an asymmetric back four. So how could that look from a Man United perspective? Well, in goal, this one's shock, I know, take a breath. I think it's going to be Lamens. Then at centre-back, for Carrick to be able to do what he wants to do, which at times was part of the problem with Borough, or certainly could be attributed to elements of his downfall, you need centre-backs who are comfortable at receiving the ball short. Lissandro Martinez, no short jokes please, because I'm a short king myself, is an obvious option for this position because he's good on the ball. Especially because he's going to be asked to move wider at times to allow the left back to then move higher up the pitch. At right centre-back, it could be Aidan Heaven, or equally Lenny Yoro, as they both share similar levels of form right now and skill sets. The right back in this team will have less attacking emphasis than that left back. And that works, I think, for this Man United side and squad in terms of the personnel they've got. And this is something I like about Carrick. It's allowing players to do what they're probably good at. I don't think he's going to try and reinvent players into new roles like we've seen with Amorim. Diogo Dalot ticks the box in this aspect, but I think a lot of people seem to have discounted Mazraoui, who was brilliant last season. And as someone who's like, not that out-and-out blistering Frimpong right back, but is a good aid to a winger, Mazraoui, I think, would be a really, really good option. Dalot's always going to be a bit of a decoy run, and his output disappoints me. And so when you then bring it back to the defensive side of, a traditional fullback, the defensive actions, you can see that Mazraoui massively outshines Dalot from this perspective. And with the left back taking up a high position, the defensive ability for me of Mazraoui could become so useful in rest defense situations. And I really feel like he's going to have a really strong second half of the season, actually. And thus, don't be surprised if he slots in at right back once he's back from AFCON. The left back role requires a specialist. At Middlesbrough, Carrick used Illing Jr., a winger who can also play at left back. Actually had Isaiah Jones on the other side as well. So that was a bit of a theme, partly due to the squad that he was given. But at Middlesbrough, and I think at Man United too, attacking is going to be the main focus of the left back in his system. Meaning that it probably won't be Luke Shaw. I think there'll be moments for him. And in terms of that asymmetric idea, there might be ways where you flip it a little bit and utilise Luke Shaw with someone like Matheus Cunha, which we'll get to. But a player who could be used in a very similar way as Carrick utilised his system at Middlesbrough is Patrick Dorgu. Next, we need to talk about the midfield and the two different roles within it. Let's start off with the role of Aidan Morris, who is a key component in both the deep build-up but also the rest defence in transition. Because Morris is part of the double pivot, which is a fixed component of Carrick's system, often forming this 3-2 base in build-up. And the role of Morris is to connect play via little bounce passes and dictate the tempo, looking to control the ball and ultimately progress it. But that's not it. He also has the defensive responsibility to sit in front of the defence and cover them. All the bells and whistles that you'd like from a deep-lying midfielder with a little bit of bite. That sounds like Carrick, doesn't it? The Man United one option would be Manuel Ugarte. He's got the mobility to cover the ground and the tenacity to win the duels, but on the ball is disappointing, let's put it that way. However, we actually feel like Casemiro, I think, will be the favoured one in this role for his reading of the game and the added quality on the ball, especially in a two. Alongside this sitting midfielder, Carrick liked to have a box-to-box player. Hayden Hackney filled this role at Middlesbrough, and on the Ripple Effect, actually, this week, we had George Ellick from Not the Top 20 podcast, who is an expert when it comes to the EFL, and he spoke about Hayden Hackney, and if Carrick hadn't got his hands on Hayden Hackney and turned him into a much better player, then he believes his career would not have got to the heights it's already got to. His heat map shows the incredible amount of ground that he was able to cover during a match. He averaged 86.1 touches per 90 under Carrick in the 24-25 season, ranking second most in the team. And Hackney had that license to roam, like here, where he drops during build-up to offer a passing option and breaks that first line of pressure. So from here, he's driving forwards to kickstart attacks before releasing the ball into one of those forwards. And key for Hayden Hackney's role was the ability to drill passes between the lines, offering that injection of pace to cut through the opposition's defensive unit. So when we're coming back to the Man United squad and how that kind of player could sit into this team, I think it means the revival of Kobbie Mainoo. Again, another player I think is just going to absolutely fly. And George Ellick spoke about that again on the podcast. We'll put a link to that in the description. And George really felt that Michael Carrick could do what he did for Hayden Hackney with Kobbie Mainoo. His progressive carries stand out for the role, and he can drive through central areas, evade pressure, and get his side going forward as well. And interestingly enough, there was talk about Hayden Hackney and his ability to get around the pitch, which obviously sounds familiar when we're talking about Kobbie Mainoo. So those question marks could disappear once Michael Carrick gets a little bit more time with Kobbie Mainoo in this side. Now, it's not all about stats, but his progressive passes are relatively low. I think that's down to the minutes that he's had and the team that he's playing in. Hackney averages 8.78, so Mainoo would need to improve in this area, but we've seen it before. We know what he can do. I think he just needs that guy that, really, really believes in him and lets him flourish. So let's move on to the attack, where there are some really, really interesting profiles, which is crucial in all of this. That's going to be a big, big part of what Carrick will look to bring. He doesn't really care about the positions of the players. It's more about the strengths that they've got. My tactics board is now yours to use. Build lineups, create tactics, and analyze games with hundreds of teams. Perfect for coaches, content creators, FPL heads, journalists, and just bloody good football people. Sign up for free and upgrade anytime to the advanced plan. Links in the description. And let's start with the left wing, who will have an interesting dynamic with Patrick Dorgu as that overlapping left back. Carrick is not afraid to attack down the sides and allow those fullbacks to bomb on when it feels right and necessary, underlapping or overlapping. For Middlesbrough, Finn Azaz actually played here. He's a really, really fun, great player who's got real individual skill. But his heat map shows his primary position was actually in that left half space. Despite starting on the left, Azaz finds himself almost exclusively on the inside, looking to receive progressive passes in those pockets of space between the lines, which is exactly where he wants to get on the ball. His ability to receive on the half turn and then make decisions in the attacking third were key, and he is often the one that would be taking those risks, which is exactly what you want with those kinds of players, those kinds of profiles. And with the dynamic of having an overlapping left back who is a threat in his own right, because I think that's crucial here, Azaz is able to find himself in zone 14 more often, a dangerous area where he can then provide those killer passes or take a shot himself. So there's a few nominees for this role. I think Matheus Cunha would enjoy it. I think Mason Mount would really enjoy it. But Bruno Fernandes, I think, would be perfect for this role, being able to receive further forwards and be the decisive figurehead for the Man United attack. So those other options, Matheus Cunha, who did a similar job at Wolves. I absolutely love Matheus Cunha, and so I don't want him to get lost in this. especially starting wide and then drifting inside with an overlapping fullback. If you think back to probably the best performance or one of them against Arsenal in that first game of the season, it was Matheus Cunha being given the ball in that second half that made a massive difference because they became so much more effective. However, Bruno Fernandes, he's got to be in the team, hasn't he? I'd be amazed if, imagine he's on the bench. That becomes, a news story, which obviously Man United don't need. They don't need to be afraid of it, but they don't need it. And Fernandes has always been so influential, and he's needed to be as well, but he's not shirked away from that responsibility. So I think under Carrick, that will continue. Now onto the right winger, and it's very different. Instead of coming to get involved in play, Marcus Forss, who I think is a really interesting one when it comes to, taking this Middlesbrough side and what Carrick did with them and moving it over to Man United. Because his role was to provide more width before making bursting runs in behind to stretch the defence. And so the right winger was often the sort of secondary outlet ball, staying high and wide, looking to attack the last line or get in behind, and also deliver crosses or get shots off. He would often make runs centrally too, and again, with an emphasis on attacking in behind the last line and getting shots away. So it's, like any good team, it's those pairings and those counter movements to allow one person to drop forward and then another to go in behind. Not rocket science. On this other side, I guess it's about preference here. So we're just plucking initially, despite his off-the-ball movement being brilliant, and me knowing that Brian Mbeumo, I think, would absolutely work nicely in this role. I think Amad Diallo could nail down this right-hand side, with Mbeumo taking a slightly different role in Carrick's side. So moving on to the number 10 role. And when you think number 10 for Man United, again, we're saying those names. I think you're thinking Mount, you're thinking Matheus Cunha, you're thinking Bruno Fernandes. But Carrick has used this role in such an interesting way. So Kelechi Iheanacho was often deployed as an attacking midfielder, despite, most of us knowing him as a centre forward. His heat map shows how this role would often find him wide and deep. And he would find himself in these pockets of space between the lines, essentially operating on the right half space, but kind of as a forward in terms of having his back to goal a lot of the time and kind of dragging out a centre-back a lot of the time too. So these centre-forward traits were very, very useful in this role. Holding off defenders, bringing others into play, kind of being that little bit of a magnet to other players with the ball, up into him like you would a normal centre-forward, but he's in a slightly different position. Instead of being kind of up there and battling with them, he was popping off a little bit, which meant that those defenders were coming with him. Also, he had the quality to set up his partner ahead of him. And another benefit is the secondary attacker in the box with goal-scoring instincts, arriving in dangerous positions and threatening the opposition's goal, but crucially, at the right time. Not kind of being in there and waiting for it, but arriving there. Which brings us on to Chuba Akpom, who was used in the exact same way as centre-forward, but utilising that skill set from a slightly different position. And Akpom absolutely exploded under Carrick. Akpom could act as a bounce board in central areas to aid those connections with those around him before making clever runs in and around the box and getting plenty of shots off and scoring tons of goals. He actually scored an incredible 28 goals in the Championship in the 22-23 season from this position. Another profile that was used was Morgan Whittaker. More of a ball carrier, more of a kind of conventional winger, I guess, and less emphasis of those sort of striker abilities or those striker-like runs as well. And if Carrick wanted to utilise a natural number 10 in this role, I think he would likely go for someone like Matheus Cunha, because I think in terms of out 10, Matheus Cunha is the guy for me, I think. However, we believe that he could look to utilise Benjamin Sesko, who's now starting to find a little bit of form, isn't he, in a similar way to Iheanacho and Akpom in order to get the best out of their big money signing. And I really like this, actually. I like the idea of him, being that physical presence, but bringing players into play because he's technically good, and then either bursting into the box and finding kind of separation from his defenders that way, or just arriving at the right time, coming onto chances as much as anything else. And I think that's what Carrick will do. It'll be one where, we know Sesko is a forward, but he'll play in this new role. And that moves us on to the centre forward, who once again has an interesting role which worked really nicely in tandem with that number 10, which hopefully isn't confusing you because it's kind of the other way around a little bit. And his instincts were to peel wide at times and provide runs in behind, often attacking the channels or attacking that space that Akpom or Iheanacho had provided for him. For this goal, Conway found space to receive the forward pass before combining to get himself inside the box to score. Carrick wants his striker to be active on the last line, making those runs into the channels and creating space for others. And while Seshko can do this, we've had a think, and we just believe that Bryan Mbeumo's movement could make him thrive as the centre forward under Carrick. But as I said, don't worry too much about, the fact that one person's the centre forward and another person's the attacking midfielder. It's about the profiles of those players and when they get the ball and where they get the ball and how it allows them to sing. Two crucial things. First of all, I promised I'd cheer you up, didn't I? There you go. That should do it. It's Jim on a camel! Huh? You didn't think you'd see that. And second of all, I reckon, look, Carrick isn't permanent, but I'm sure he'd welcome an addition or two. Well, that's fortunate, Michael, because I used data to find every club's perfect signing to see who they should get. Click here.